They had an answer for when we didn't, get our job done on defense, and they had an answer for the turnovers.
The Owls offense comes to life in their homecoming battle, but it still wasn't enough.
On the defensive end, the Owls fell short when it came to pass rush, which ultimately led to UTSA leaving the link with a win.
I'm Hayden Vandell, live from Edinburgh Golson Hall. Coming up, I'll tell you about a pair of offensive linemen that transferred to Temple from a junior college powerhouse.
Conference play is officially underway from top to bottom in the AAC. I'm Sam Cavone, live from the studio set, and I will fill you in with all of the important information you need to know as Week 6 of college football comes to a close. Inside the Nest is live, and it starts right now.
Hello and welcome on into another edition of Inside the Nest. I'm Meg Doyle and he's Jake Gable.
It was homecoming weekend for Temple, and for the first time in program history, they matched up against UTSA. It was a shootout as the two teams combined for 83 points. The Owls enjoyed their largest crowd of the season so far, and the two teams certainly gave the fans in the stands a show. Opening drive, E.J. Warner finds David Martin Robinson in the end zone. Temple held the ball for nearly 7 minutes on the possession. Later in the first, Joquez Smith gets the pitch to the right side, picks up a first down, but then fumbles, the first of his career. The Roadrunners take advantage on the handoff. Kevorian Barnes rushes 14 yards for the touchdown. Still first quarter, a screen pass to Martin Robinson, again getting the reception. With help from his blockers and a juke, he goes 33 yards for the score. Moving on to the second quarter, UTSA with the ball. Frank Harris surveys the fields and connects with Joshua Cephas in the back of the end zone to knot the game up at 14. Another Roadrunners touchdown. Now the Owls have it trailing. Some trickery from Temple gets Warner the football back to find a wide open John Adams for 31 yards. And again, the game is tied. Towards the end of the first half, Warner is sacked and loses the football. The second game in a row, Warner fumbles. The UTSA player ends up fumbling it as well, and eventually the Roadrunners do come up with it at the Temple 6-yard line. The very next play, Robert Henry bursts right up the middle for the touchdown to make it 28-21, and we're only at halftime.
A close matchup moving on to the second half. The Owls only down by 7, but the Roadrunner lead quickly increases. Harris passes deep to Taigi O'Kellogg for a 40-yard touchdown pass. The Owls fail to respond with 12:47 left in the third, but get a groove in the fourth. Warner completes a short pass to Darvon Hubbard, who runs 36 yards into scoring territory. This sets Warner up for a 2-yard touchdown pass to Peter Clark. However, the Owls fail their 2-point conversion attempt. UTSA finds the end zone one last time and leave the link with a 49-34 win over Temple. Let's break down the stats. Warner completed 65% of his passes, 42 for 65 with 472 passing yards and 5 touchdowns. But that ground game is rough right now. Joquez Smith had the most rushing yards for Temple with 27. Walk-on John Adams had a career-high game with 10 receptions, 127 receiving yards, and 1 touchdown. On the flip side, UTSA's Frank Harris completed 76% of his passes, 24 for 33 with 338 passing yards. Robert Henry had 78 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Finally, Devin McCoon with 6 receptions for 94 receiving yards and 1 touchdown.
After the game, the offense had a lot of positives to talk about, but that was not the case for the defense.
We're going to hear from E.J. Warner and John Adams from the offensive side and Jordan McGee from the defense.
For sure, yeah. I think it was one of our better games, but we made a couple critical turnovers that hurt our team. So not perfect, and we know we need to get better, but definitely an improvement, hopefully a step in the right direction. I mean, we were just in the huddle, and I told him to stay alive because I knew it might come back just in case. So just went from DMR. They covered it up pretty well. I just came back. John was standing there wide open, gave him a chance, made a play. just a lot of guys on our team stepping up, a lot of guys making plays for me. I just had to get the ball out quick, put it in their hands, and they did the rest. Just proud of my team, proud of our offense today for just competing, and hopefully, obviously didn't come out the way we wanted to at the end, but we just got to keep working and hopefully come back better next week.
Miscommunication, things happen on the fly. We try to prepare like how we're supposed to before the game, of course. But the game hits, you're out there, the game is moving fast, and you can get jumbled up sometimes. But we got to go back and hit it harder in the books.
Nah, it didn't just develop over time, man. I came in early every single day, and I just went on the jugs, and Coach said he needed me this year, and I just made it a job for me to just go in every day and catch some, 250 balls a day in the morning before we go to practice and after practice. So that's how I got better. That trick play was it was surprising to me, I ain't gonna lie, but we rep it at practice. We do every play, so you can't be surprised when the play is called, and I wasn't surprised, and we just went out there as a team and went to go execute. That was the thing.
Now, Temple had a tough loss this game. One person I want to talk about first is John Adams. He is a walk-on, but he had a career-high game, 127 receiving yards, 10 receptions, 16 rushing yards. I mean, he puts in the work. He mentioned at the press conference that he shows up early to practice and does 250 balls before practice even begins. Now, the game as a whole, they performed pretty well starting off. Their first drive was 6 minutes and 43 seconds, which happens to be the longest drive of the season. It was a strong passing game as well. I mean, 472 passing yards. That is pretty impressive. That made it E.J. Warner's fourth 300-yard game for his career. He is now tied #2 on Temple's all-time list. And Jake, I think that's pretty well deserved for E.J.
Yeah, let's keep the passing stats going because they've been doing great in that department. It's the 17th straight game that Temple has had at least 115 passing yards. That's the longest streak in program history. That streak coincidentally started week 2 last season when Warner came in for relief for DeJuan Mathis. So really, that entire record is really on the back of E.J. Warner right there. Now for the defense, they're breaking the wrong types of records. The third straight game of allowing 40 or more points, the largest streak since 2006. To give you a little bit of perspective there, Temple went 1-11 that season to show you just how bad that defense was that year. And the rushing difference in this game. Temple had 70 yards and no touchdowns. Meanwhile, the Roadrunners were running the ball. They had 157 yards for 4 touchdowns. In a 2-score game, those 4 touchdowns mean a lot.
It certainly does. Now, we saw a little bit of improvement from both the offense and the defense, but we still did not see them play a full 4-quarter game. We haven't really seen that at all this season. I mean, Temple offense, they had a good start, but then they had 2 fumbles, and that really killed their momentum. I mean, UTSA ended up scoring on both of those drives, and I think that could have been the difference maker in this game. Another thing that Temple has, a young offensive line. There were a lot of injuries, so the younger players had to step up. They just don't have as many reps, which I also think had an impact.
Yeah, but to end on a tiny positive note, the tight end usage was really good in this game. 190 yards, 3 touchdowns, 17 receptions spread out between 4 different tight ends. That's David Martin Robinson, Jordan Smith, Reese, and Peter Clark. Shout out to Peter Clark for catching his first touchdown on his very first reception of his career.
That was an exciting game for him. You already know we had a crew at this past weekend's homecoming game. Inside the Nest, Hayden Bandel is live at Edberg Olsen right now and was also at the game. Hey Hayden, what was that atmosphere like?
Hey Meg, that atmosphere was really cool, and I don't think I've seen the Lincoln Financial parking lots filled like that for a Temple home game in a while. Both the K and M lots were completely packed with tailgaters who brought food and games. There were also live artists who performed, and student organizations had tables set up for people to stop by. All of this, and the weather wasn't even great. In terms of attendance, there was 18,000 plus people that attended the game, which was the most for a Temple home game this year. But that is also the least amount of homecoming fans that Temple has had since the 2009 season. Now let's get back inside of Lincoln Financial Field to the players. This year, Temple's roster features 11 former junior college players. There are 2 separate groups and pairs that have also came from the same school. Jacob Hollins and Elijah Derville transferred from Garden City Community College. Then there's Diego Barajas and Chris Smith, who transferred from Laney College, a school that was featured on the last season of Netflix's documentary Last Chance U.
When you watch Division I football players on TV, their journey is often the road less traveled. Many athletes wind their way through junior colleges before making it to big-time programs.
Well, community college is a stepping stone, right?
There are many different reasons student athletes go to a two-year institution to continue their football career, and they aren't always for positive reasons.
It was definitely hard having to not get recruited my high school and back in high school because I was very injury-ridden.
Offensive lineman Chris Smith, number 66, and Diego Barajas, number 77, both went to Laney College, a JUCO with a rich football history located in Oakland, California.
So you come to a place like Laney, it's an easy way to fulfill that dream.
John Beam has been coaching football for 44 years, and his goal at Laney is to try and get his athletes out after a year and a half.
I'm taking young men and helping them become men, become fathers, right? To become valuable members of society.
It's always been a goal of mine to play Division I football. So, I mean, going JUCO is just another step.
Smith and Barajas were in a position battle for the starting right tackle spot when they arrived at Laney.
It wasn't always a happy relationship, but we weren't really friends yet. We were just teammates at that point.
Barajas ended up winning the starting right tackle position, and Smith became the starting center. The two became the leaders of the offensive line and formed a friendship along the way.
Smith and Barajas didn't plan to come to Temple together, but it's no coincidence that they did. John Beam has known Temple OC Danny Langsdorf for over 20 years.
It's good to have a coach that has a lot of connections. I'm grateful that he has connections like that to help me get out.
If it wasn't for them, if it wasn't for their relationship with Beam, then yeah, probably me or Diego wouldn't be here.
What people need to understand is when you come to Laney College, you're coming for the hope and opportunity that we can provide. Right?
John Beam has coached more than 30 players from Laney College that have ended up making it to the NFL level. When I spoke with Coach Beam on Wednesday, he told me that Temple offensive coordinator Danny Langsdorf has not called him yet this season. Danny Langsdorf usually calls him at least once a year to see if he has any tools from Laney to replenish his offense here at Temple. That's all I have now from Edberg Olson Hall. Meg and Jake, back to you.
Thanks, Hayden. We saw plenty of offense in this last matchup, which means there are a lot of big plays to choose from.
It's time for Snapshot. Jake, what's your pick for this week?
Well, mine's going to be on UTSA's side. Frank Harris with the ball. He's going to sling it 40 yards to Tyke Ogle-Kellogg for the touchdown. Stop it right here. You're going to see the Temple coverage up top. Ben Osweke is supposed to be on Kellogg, but he is a couple yards behind him already, and the play just started. Over on this other side, you see safety Alex Odom double teaming with Jalen McMurray on a different receiver. He's completely locked up. I don't think there needs to be two guys covering him. I think someone needs to be helping Osweke on the other side. Play it, and you'll see that Osweke is just trying to catch up to him. He almost does at the end, but just can't get to him.
For my play, I'm doing Temple's trick shot touchdown. You see EJ right here. He has time for days. He slings it down to John Adams, who ends up getting his first career touchdown. We'll watch it back. EJ to Darvon Hubbard. Hubbard to right back to EJ. We're going to stop it right here. You see EJ is wide open. The defense definitely got tricked out by this play, which I guess is the point of it. Go ahead and play it. EJ has the perfect amount of time to send a beautiful 31-yard pass to John Adams for an amazing touchdown play.
It's now time for our first break of the day. When we come back, we'll be listening to a more positive news conference from Stan Drayton for the first time in a while.
Stay tuned. Inside the Nest will be back in just 90 seconds.
Welcome back to Inside the Nest. Despite the loss, head coach Stan Drayton was a little bit more positive in his news conference this week.
In part one, Drayton talks about the success of the offense last weekend and the injuries along with the offensive line.
You know, learned a lot about our football team in this game. You know, there's still a lot in the tank. You know, despite our injuries and our shortcomings, I mean, we had some guys out there play with a lot of heart. Our tight end position performed extremely well. Thought our quarterback, you know, stepped up and played with heart on his sleeve. And, you know, in spots it looked like that team can win a bunch of ball games. We just got to find a way to put it all together. You know, these are the times where Temple Owls step up, you know, and, you know, I don't hear any excuses coming out of our locker room. I mean, a bunch of guys that are, you know, wanting to play out there that can't by way of misfortune. They're staying positive. You know, they're encouraging their teammates to stay positive. And, you know, we just have not been consistent with our execution. You know, there's points that you can turn back and look at where we could do a much better job of coaching. But I think that we took a step forward this week. There's a lot more we can get out of them, for sure. Is there improvement? Yes. Steady in certain people. Some, no. You know, but again, we're staying as positive as we can in that respect. It's not like we're going to be able to, you know, clone another one out there, you know, in the hallway somewhere, right? So we gotta continue to work with the guys that we have, and I know that their heart's in the right place, and they have their limitations, and we have to, you know, make sure that we, as a coaching staff, put them in the best position so that we can perform within their strengths and not as much as their weaknesses. So we got to find that. Absolutely self-inflicted, you know, and defense is taking advantage of poor fundamentals and, you know, a lack of focus in the way we're carrying the football right now, quite honestly. You know, if Joe Quez is going to carry the football for us, then he needs to carry that football like it's our family. You know, that's what it has to be, you know. We need to put two hands on that football, and, you know, in traffic we have enough examples of when we do not, that's in jeopardy, you know, and that is a mindset that we really need to enhance on this football team for our ball carriers.
On offense, you guys are able to stretch the field horizontally with tosses or...
That was part one of Coach Drayton's presser. Jake, I'm going to jump right into it. One thing Stan kept saying is that he saw improvement, but now it's time to just put it all together. And I could not agree more with that, quite frankly. It's now at the midway point. If they want any bowl eligibility, they need to change. Stan talked about how it was a step forward, which it was nice to hear positive feedback from him. But does positive feedback really mean much if nothing really is changing? Sometimes I think we need a little bit more of tough love for the Owls.
Yeah, and speaking of that, we heard a lot about the heart that the players are showing. That's nice and all, but I think it's time to just get to some results finally. Heart's nice, but I don't need to hear about it anymore. You should have heart if you're a college football team. Also, you need to hold on to the ball. The Owls have fumbled in 4 straight games, and that's the difference between good teams and bad teams. Do they turn the ball over, and then if they get turnovers, do they capitalize on them? So far, the Owls have been turning the ball over, and the other team has been capitalizing on their mistakes. Now it's time to get to part 2 with Stan Drayton. He singles out a few different players, and it starts with John Adams.
All right, there's never a question of, you know, what he's going to do for the football team. He's always unselfishly found himself a role on our special teams unit from year 1 through year 2 with me in this program. And I don't know if you guys remember, but we talked about John before in fall camp. And, you know, I told you that this guy was emerging, you know. I mean, he was finding ways to get open. He was running with more confidence within his routes. He was having a firmer understanding of reading coverages and using his size and his speed to his advantage. And it was a matter of, you know, believing in his hands. And I think that, you know, he's a great example of the next man up. You know, it wasn't like there was a day 2 weeks ago where I'm like, hey, he's got to put him in. He's the starting guy. You know, I think it took for Ahmad being questionable, you know, Dante being questionable, you know, freshmen having to play. Quay Mahone probably played his best game. You know, Darkwa is starting to, you know, get game reps underneath him now. You know, we're not getting a whole lot of pass rush out of him right now. That's what we're not seeing, you know, that we would like to see a lot more of. So we have to find ways to create that pass rush in other ways. But I'm not seeing a whole lot of mistakes anymore, you know, but we just have to keep developing. You know, that's one unit that I know they have more in them, you know, and yeah, we are depleted, you know, but again, the guys that are out there can give us more. They can just, you know, they just play disciplined football and just play with their heart on their sleeve, we'll try to fix it everywhere else around them. Yeah, you can't make that up, man. That's real stuff there, and he has a real passion for this football team, and there's no question why his teammates voted him a single digit. He's the example of giving everything you got, even though he can't physically do it. Love in for that, and I'm sure his players appreciate every bit of that as well.
Coach Drayton ended with his point about Ian Stewart being a leader, so that's where I'm going to start out with. I love to hear that he's getting praise for what he's been doing in the locker room. He hasn't been able to play many games so far. He's played in just 6 games in 2 years here at Temple, and the 6 games that he has been able to play in, he's barely gotten any playing time, whether being on a snap count to limit his touches or he gets hurt and has to leave the game. So I love to hear that he's doing a great job in that department and earning that single digit as a leader. I hope he gets the chance to eventually show that he can be a single digit with his performance. Now, moving on to the pass rush, it's definitely been lacking. The injuries along the D-line haven't helped either. Demarick Morris was out before the season even started. He's out for the rest of the season. And Alan Hay, he got hurt a couple weeks ago. He's out for the rest of the season. So for a group of guys that were already struggling to get a pass rush going, now they have to deal with injuries, and it's just really tough for them so far.
It definitely is tough. Now, you gave love to Ian Stewart. You talked about how Stan gave love to him. I want to talk about how Stan gave love to John Adams. I talked about him a little bit before, but Stan was saying how about during fall camp, he saw that he had potential. Now, he is a sophomore walk-on, and he certainly does have potential. I mean, Stan called him the next man up. He was filling in some big shoes for some players that were injured, like Ahmad Anderson and Dante Wright, and he did not fail, and I think he's going to be a big asset for the Owls moving forward.
It'll be really interesting to see what he does moving forward.
Coming up after the break, 3 players spoke to the media, and we will hear from their thoughts on what's coming up.
Then later, we will preview Temple's next game against North Texas. ITN Back will be back in a minute 30.
Welcome back to Inside the Nest. Stan Drayton talks on Mondays. The players talk on Tuesdays. Hayden Bendell, he talks whenever we toss to him, no matter what the day is.
3 Owls just spoke to the media, and Hayden was there for it. Hey, Hayden.
Hey, Jake. Freshman Colin Green and junior cornerback Dominic Hill both spoke to the media today. Colin Green talked about how he made his second career start against UTSA. Dominic Hill made his first start at safety this season. Hill started the first 5 games at cornerback for the Owls. In terms of Colin Green, he talked about how he was just really thrown in the Ross. He had guys go down on his defensive line, such as Alan Hay, KJ Miles, along with Demarick Morris. So it has been just him get thrown into the Ross on the defensive line. But he said those veteran guys have helped him out. He said that he felt nervous, but now he feels more comfortable, and they make him feel like he's not really a true freshman. As for Dominic Hill, being moved to that safety spot, he said it feels it's because his coaches trust him even more because of his high defensive IQ. He's transferred from South Carolina, so he has played in SEC football games before. And now he is still both in the cornerback and the safety room, so he's getting a little bit of both on that end. He said the only difference between playing safety for him is that he feels that he has to be more vocal when he's both on and off of the field. That's all I have now from who spoke to the media today. Meg and Jake, back to you.
Thanks, Hayden. With UTSA in the rearview mirror, we look ahead now to Temple's next opponent.
Another Texas matchup. Temple will be heading back down south to take on North Texas for its second of 3 consecutive matchups against schools from Texas. This marks the first time Temple has played 3 straight schools from the same state outside of PA.
Now it's time to roll the tape on the Mean Green from North Texas. They sport a very explosive offense, not only one of the best in the conference, but one of the best in the country. Their defense is their Achilles heel, however, the worst rush defense in all of FBS. Quarterback Chandler Rogers is a dual threat and has 8 passing touchdowns and 3 rushing scores. This offense averages 33 points per game, but the defense allows 39 points a game.
We saw the game highlights. Let's look at the stats. Navy took a close win over North Texas 27-24 this past weekend. Rogers threw for 267 yards, and that included a 75-yard touchdown. Running back Ayo Adeyi rushed for 125 yards on 14 carries and a touchdown. Jay Macklin, cousins with NFL pro Jeremy Macklin, had 6 receptions for 76 yards and his 6th touchdown of the season. Of course, Navy doesn't throw too often. Quarterback Ty Lavatai had a 50% completion rate, 4 for 8 for 75 yards. Running back Alex Teska had 2 touchdowns for the night with 137 rushing yards. Finally, Brandon Chapman had 1 reception for 30 yards. Now that we know some of the stats on the Mean Green, let's talk about how they're going to match up against Temple.
Well, the Temple run offense finally has a chance to step up here against the worst rush defense in the country. They are giving up a lot of rushing yards per game. They have the worst rush defense in terms of yards allowed per game in all of FBS. And the next closest team is allowing 30 fewer yards per game than North Texas is. That means they're in their own stratosphere with how many yards they're giving up. Temple has had a big time struggle with trying to run the ball so far this season, so maybe they finally have a chance. Another thing about Temple, 4 games straight without forcing a turnover. That's the longest streak in program history. North Texas does have 9 turnovers in their first 5 games, so that does give the Owls a little bit of hope in that department. And now, 1, 2, 3, 4. That stands for 1st in total yards in the conference, 2nd in points scored, 3rd in rushing yards, and 4th in passing yards per game. The Mean Green offense is really mean, let me tell you.
That is so true. Off that point, the Mean Green's quarterback Chandler Rogers completed 22 out of his 32 passes, which is pretty impressive. He also threw no picks against Navy. Now we know turnovers is something Temple has been struggling with. Now both North Texas and Temple have strong offenses and weaker defenses. So at the end of the day, I think it's going to come down to the battle of the defenses. Who can perform better? North Texas has surrendered 1,298 rushing yards for the season. Temple has given up 1,227 rushing yards. I mean, Temple has played 1 more game, but those stats are still pretty similar. Those defenses just cannot stop the run game. So I think this is a great opportunity for Temple's offense to take advantage and get a run game going. They need to do this from the start so they can start off with a lead and hopefully take a win.
Now that we know what the Owls are up against, they have to capitalize. In order to do that, they have to follow a blueprint for success. Tool number 1, bring pressure. The Mean Green have allowed their QB to be sacked 14 times in just 5 games so far this season. They have lost 94 yards on these sacks as well. Coach Drayton mentioned needing to bring more pressure on defense and maybe blitzing an extra guy once in a while. This could be a difference maker. Now, tool 2, hold North Texas to field goals. The North Texas offense has the 2nd best red zone offense in the AAC, walking away with points on over 90% of their trips. We know this is a team that can put points on the board. While ideally you force them to punt, walking away giving up 3 points instead of 7 points once they're in the red zone can still be a win for the defense, especially when your defense gave up 7 touchdowns last week.
Tool number 3, consistency. This is a problem we've been seeing from Temple all season long. They failed to play a full 4-quarter football game. Both the offense and defense tend to play better in one half over the other, but never both. Turnovers have been killing the momentum for the offense, while the defense is still missing assignments. The Owls need to lock in and play a full game. The final tool for today, hold the football like it's family, as Stan Drayton would say. Fumbles and interceptions are often the difference makers in games for Temple and usually the result of a lack of focus. It's the midway point. The Owls need to be as focused as ever and hold on to that ball.
Last week, everyone agreed that the Roadrunners would be too much for the Owls. Hayden and I stay undefeated at 6-0, and Meg and Sam move up to 5-1. Now it's time to hear our predictions for this week's matchup against the Mean Green from North Texas. Welcome to the Triple Box, everyone. A first here at Inside the Next. I'll get things started with my score prediction. I know one thing for sure, it's going to be high scoring, but I have North Texas coming out on top 39-35. The good news for Temple, the Mean Green give up 39 points a game. The bad news, they average 33 points per game. We saw last week the Owls can score in a shootout. We also saw that they can't get stops. Expect to see a lot of touchdowns and a lot of broken clipboards from the defensive coaches. Sam, North Texas enters this game as 8-point favorites. Are you siding with me, or do you have Temple pulling off the upset?
Hey Jake, this week I am siding with you and picking the Mean Green to defeat the Owls 33-27. We already know Temple's history with road games, and that already puts them at a disadvantage. This North Texas team, like you said, has one of the best offensive lines in the league. Like you said, again, this team averages about 33 points and about 468 yards every game. But looking on the bright side, Temple could potentially establish its run game and get some points on the board, as the Mean Green doesn't have the great rushing defense. Hayden, looking ahead to Week 7 of the season, you are still undefeated in your score predictions. Who do you have winning the conference matchup this weekend?
Well, Sam, you mentioned it. North Texas rushing defense is the bottom team in the country in terms of rushing yards allowed per game. However, Temple is in the bottom 10 in terms of rushing yards gained per game. If you take out that FCS opponent, Norfolk State, where they ran for 290 yards, they would be averaging just 51 rushing yards a game, which would be the lowest in the country. For that reason, I'm going to take North Texas to win 38-31. Meg, I see you anxiously waiting up there. Who you got?
Hayden, I'm agreeing with everyone this week, and I have North Texas taking this win over Temple 37-34. I see this being a close win, but at the end of the day, I think the turnovers are what is going to give North Texas the win. Temple is 14th, which is dead last in the AAC for turnovers, and North Texas is 8th. It's also a road game, as Sam mentioned, which doesn't work well in Temple's favor.
We all went with North Texas taking the win this week, and now we are coming up on another break.
On the other side, it's time to go no huddle. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. It's that time of the show again. We're going no huddle.
We have 2 minutes to answer 3 questions about the Owls. Let's get it started.
All right, question 1. Is it time to give up on the run game, or at least go back to the drawing board?
Jake, I'm going to be positive here. I'm going never say never. We finally saw a little bit of run action in this past game against UTSA. That would be 70 rushing yards, which by no means is a good stat, but it shows a lot of improvement from their past games. And I think if they build off of that momentum, we could possibly get a run game going. And the Owls know they need to step up now at the midway point. So I'm hopeful.
Well, Meg, I'm jealous of your optimism, but I don't think that's the case. I think you just have to start to lean in with your strengths, which is obviously the passing game. They've been able to pass and get yards every play when they're going through the air. I can't say the same when they're running on the ground. I think you can't pass every play, but you do have to lean on it.
All right, question number 2 now. Temple's last road win was back in 2021. It's an 11-game road losing streak. What do you think Temple's problem is when they leave the link?
The problem is that the defense doesn't travel with them. They are averaging 40 points per game given up as a defense ever since Stan Drayton took over as head coach. Meanwhile, at home, they're averaging 25 points per game that they give up on defense. The defense just needs to come with them when they go on the road.
Another problem I think on the road is they typically tend to have a bigger fan show out at opponents' games. I mean, at Temple's games, they've had 2 home games and about 15,000 fans averaging, and opponents' games, they typically have about 30,000. So I think that has a big impact there.
Yeah, that's a big difference. We'll head on a positive note, though. Who's your MVP to start the season so far?
My MVP is Tywan Francis. Right now, he leads the AAC with 30 solo tackles. He ranks second in total tackles with 47. And on top of that, he stands at 3rd in tackles per game. So he's had a pretty impressive season so far.
I'll go on the offensive side. It's the guy you see on the screen right here, E.J. Warner. I mean, he's 10th in the nation in total passing yards so far, over 1,700. Of course, they're passing a lot because they're playing from behind and the run game hasn't been going so well. But for a guy that had over 400 passing yards last week and 5 touchdowns, he's got to be your MVP.
It has been a pretty impressive season for Warner as well. It's now time for our final break of the day. In just 90 seconds, we'll be bringing Sam Cavone on the desk for the AAC Rundown.
You heard her. 90 seconds. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back. We're nearing the end of our show, which means it's time to talk all things AAC.
Sam Cavone is back and at the studio set to give us the weekly AAC Rundown. Hey, Sam.
Thanks, guys. Conference play has heated up this week. South Florida dropped down in the American Conference to 6th place after its loss to UAB 54-35. They now have a record of 2-1 in the conference and 3-3 overall. Speaking of UAB, it now ranks 9th in the conference, sitting at a 1-1 record along with Rice and Tulsa. Florida Atlantic defeated Tulsa 20-17 to win its first conference game this season. FAU moves into a first-place tie. Navy's rank in the AAC has gone up after defeating North Texas 27-24, advancing to a 1-2 record in conference play. North Texas sits at 0-1 after this loss. Overall, there are 4 teams still looking for a conference win, and of course, that includes Temple. And that brings us to my standout game of the week. For this week, UAB versus South Florida is where I will focus some attention.
Hey Sam, welcome on over to the desk. Tell us more about your standout game.
So this standout game, UAB were 3-point underdogs going in. They scored 5 times in the first half alone. I mean, they completely dominated this game as the team went into halftime and they led 35-14. Now, although the Bulls were able to score 21 points during the second half, the Blazers answered them right back with 21 points of their own. The final score of this game ended up being 56-35, with UAB winning, advancing to 2-4 overall and 1-1 in the conference play.
Well, 6 new teams have joined the American Conference this season. Out of those 6, who has impressed you the most so far this season?
So I'm going to say that Rice has impressed me the most this season. You know, they're 1-1 in conference play, 3-3 overall, as I mentioned before. Another big thing is that they defeated Houston in their very first game of the season. They blew out the Texas Southern Tigers 59-7. You know, this is a team, they may not win the conference, but we can see them going extremely far as the season ends up in the last couple weeks.
That is pretty impressive for Rice. Now, my last question. Right now, there are 5 teams tied for first in the AAC. Who do you see taking that #1 spot?
So I think this is a hard one because there are so many teams tied for first, but I do believe that Memphis is going to take it. They started strong. Like I said before, they currently sit at 4-1 overall this season, and they're 1-0 in conference play. Next week they go and they face Tulane, who also has the same record of them, but the Tigers' offensive line averages 35 points per game compared to the Green Wave's 29 points per game.
All right, Sam, thank you for the knowledge as always.
Of course.
The Temple sports coverage doesn't stop with us. On Thursday at noon, our flagship program, Al Sports Update, is live with Patty Heckard and Natalie Caranda. On Monday, you can find the sports brief on our X, whatever you like to call it. And of course, we'll be back next Tuesday at noon to talk about the North Texas game.
That's all the time we have for this week's edition of Inside the Nest.
Make sure to keep up with us on all socials from our entire crew. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next Tuesday at noon.